The Sea Waifs! Today's book is The Sea Waifs by John Vail. It was originally published in 1952. It is by gold medal, but as you can see, it's not a traditional gold medal. It is a red seal book, which means it was extra fat, thicker than your average gold medal book. This is not to be confused with the red seal books that were sold in England for a while. Gold medal was selling their books in the UK, but UK law said that they had to be printed in the United Kingdom, and so these gold medal books that were printed in the UK were done under the red seal brand, which then they reused later when they did these big fatties. So The Sea Waifs is by John Vail. That was not his real name. His real name was Robert Carse, and Carse did some historical fiction and some war fiction and things like that under the name John Vail. But the majority of his writing he did under the name of Carse. The cover is by, well, I want to say Barrier Phillips, but I suppose if, his Barrier is actually a French last name, and I believe it would be Barrier Phillips, but I never met the man. I don't know how he said his first name. We'll just go with Barrier Phillips for now, and all of you Francophiles can curl your toes in disgust at my mispronunciation. So, what's The Sea Waifs about? I originally bought this book thinking, when I looked at the cover, that this was going to be sort of a sea survival kind of story, and it is not that at all. It is in fact a World War II tale about some sailors on a freighter going through Japanese submarine-infested waters in the Pacific. They are transporting military vehicles and alcohol and some other things to different bases on the different islands in the Pacific. And as you can see on the cover, they come across two women floating in an inflatable raft. Their original ship that they were on was destroyed, and they were set out into sea to survive. So the crew picks up these two women, and mayhem ensues. It's kind of just simmering before the ladies show up, but then as soon as the women show up, everything just falls apart. So there are a ton of characters in this book. I should have done like a pulp mortem thing and kept a list of who is who, because I often forgot who's this guy, who's that guy, and what's his deal, and just was too many to keep track of. So I'm only going to talk about 5 of the characters right now for you, to make it easier on you. The main character of all is, of course, the captain. His name is Peter Howe. He has been at sea for a long time and has been captain for a number of ships, some of which have gone down, and he is still wounded by that. And he really wants this ship to make it and to keep his crew in line. And he's good at that. But unfortunately, there's also Ensign Fröschig. I think that's how you would say it. Fröschig. He's German. But not Nazi German. He's American German, because he's from my hometown of Milwaukee. Back from the Ill Mill, and he has enlisted in the military during World War II. And so he is one of the gunmen on this ship. Essentially, this is a freighter and is captained by different sailors. But then amongst all of these sailors are some Navy men who are there to defend the ship in case the Zeros come swooping in or the Nazi submarines pop up and start firing torpedoes. And there is a lot of tension between the Navy men and the ordinary sailors. So, and Frosig is he's in charge of the military guys. He is very by the book. He really resents the non-military staff on the ship, and even resents that the captain is technically above him, and that the captain is able to boss him around. So there's some tension there. And then there's a guy named Umberto Analdi, and he is, you know what, I don't even remember if he's one of the regular sailors or one of the Navy men, but he's a worker on the boat, and he causes a lot of trouble. He has all of these ideas about how to get what he wants and how to come out on top, and he will cheat and steal and do rotten things to other people in order to succeed. So the ship finds these two women. They are brought on board. One of them is Martha Jonas. She's sort of a tall, shapely brunette. And the other one is Lucille Gerritsen, and she is sort of a waifish blonde. So I guess that's one of the sea waifs. They both are nurses. And so the captain is excited that maybe now we'll have some people to help out, because the guys are constantly getting injured on this ship, fixing this, tripping over that, this falling on, fingers and blah, blah, blah. So they're happy to have some nurses. But the captain is unhappy because he realizes that the nurses' arrival on the ship is causing a lot of tension. The guys are all hot to trot. It's been a while since they've had shore leave, and he is worried that some mischief is going to go on this ship as a result. Martha, the brunette, she's pretty much with it. She wants to help. She understands the situation and moves carefully and wisely about her business. She and the captain actually fall in love. It's kind of a love at first sight thing. There's a bit of push and pull over should we, shouldn't we, as the book goes on. But for the most part, she's a decent human being. Lucille, however, is a broken woman. Her mind has snapped, and for whatever reason, she feels like the only way for her to fill the hole in her soul is to sleep with as many sailors as possible. And so she is constantly trying to seduce these sailors, and them being a bunch of, horny dudes in the middle of nowhere, most of them are more than happy to scratch this itch that she has. But nothing good comes of it. In fact, well, it really is like the first domino of all these other dominoes. The captain gets in a fight with Frosig, a fist fight, because Frosig kind of hints that maybe Martha is like blonde Lucille, and that she also is, skanky. The captain does not like this, and they get in a fist fight, which pretty much knocks them both out, and they both need medical attention. And while the captain is under after this fight, then that's when everything goes wrong. Analdi literally starts pimping out blonde Lucille for the other sailors. Another sailor whose sister was a prostitute feels sorry for her because he knows how emotionally and physically and spiritually damaging this can be to a person. And so then he gets in a fight, and he steals Lucille and hides her in his cabin. And so all these guys are banging on his door, and he gets out a gun, and there's shots fired, and all this craziness happens over this girl. At the same time, there are a number of alcoholic sailors who have decided that while the captain is, healing and not conscious and not on the bridge, they are going to try and steal as much alcohol as they can from the hold. And so they break into the hold and start stealing booze and passing around bottles of whiskey and selling that. Of course, the captain comes to. Martha nurses him back, and a typhoon hits. So all these guys are fighting each other over Lucille, fighting each other over the alcohol. This enormous storm comes and threatens to sink the ship, and the captain has to, do captain-y things and make them get through this storm. And then, if they survive the storm, smack some heads around to try and get his ship back in line. That's the story in a nutshell. And I will read a little excerpt for you. This is almost every major character has a flashback. And so this is sort of within Captain Peter Howe's flashback, where he was serving in the Atlantic on a previous ship. German submarines, as many as a dozen of them, were also firing at the ships. The escort vessels dropped rack after rack of depth charges to stop their torpedoes. The water out there was wildly leaping white foam. Bomb near misses crested tremendous fountains. Exploding ships set up waves that rippled scarlet with gasoline flame. Men from sunken ships drifted, charred, faceless. One who had miraculously survived fire and was hauled aboard on a line was found to be frozen from the waist down. He died twitching on the main deck, while past him men sprinted with ammunition or flung themselves flat beneath the Stukas and Heinkels. Peter Howe was intensely proud of his ship. The young gunnery ensign and the green boys he commanded fought her with savage skill. They stood at the Browning 50s and the Oerlikons until the last possible second, pouring slugs into the fast, whipping German planes. One boy had his helmet strap snapped from under his chin by the wind force of a Heinkels passage. Another, less fortunate, was chopped in half by a Stuka burst. His severed body fell weirdly into the sea. What do you think of that? The book is really quite filled with all sorts of sailor jargon and that kind of vocabulary. And as it turns out, John Vail, or Robert Carse in reality, was a sailor himself and spent quite a bit of time on the ocean. And so he was definitely writing what he knew. Robert Carse was born in the Bronx in 1902. His father was an engineer, and his mother was a journalist. Carse went to sea for the first time at the age of 17. He spent 2 years on freighters in the Great Lakes, the West Indies, and South America. He dabbled in other work too, like working in a foundry, in a shipyard, and, like his mother, doing some journalism. He married a woman named Janet, and the two of them had a daughter named Jean. All the while he perfected his hand at writing and sold stories to the pulps. His first published story appeared in Flynn's in October of 1925. And from there he found his way into dozens of other titles, pulps and slicks, including Adventure, Sea Stories, Boy's Life, and Argosy, to just name a few. There was no type of adventure or action he wasn't willing to write about, as long as it was grounded in the real world. As far as I can tell, he never dabbled in fantasy or science fiction, but he wrote stories about pretty much everything else: sports, the Foreign Legion, the sea and sailing, aero fiction, prison escape, jungle survival, cops and urban toughs. He was prolific. He published more than 240 stories in less than 20 years. And then came World War II, and his life took a drastic change. During the war, he left writing and returned to the sea as a merchant marine. He was already 40 years old when he enlisted. He worked on a convoy for the Allies, escorting ships between Scotland and Russia. The waters were loaded with Nazi submarines, not to mention ice and mines, and suffered attacks from the air as well. Most of the ships in the convoy were unarmed, and those that were had only machine guns. and his ship was half loaded with TNT, making it an extra tantalizing target for the enemy. During the last leg of the mission, his convoy battled Nazi planes and subs for 9 days straight. One of those days, the ships had to fight off 105 attacking airplanes as ice coated their guns and slicked the ship's decks. His ship arrived in Murmansk, only to be torpedoed and sunk in the harbor. Carse later wrote of his experiences in the book There Go the Ships. In it he wrote, "We weren't fighting men when we started out, just a simple bunch of guys that you'd find in any union hall or along any dock in an American port. But we had to fight for our lives and our ships. Out there, out in the Western Ocean and up in the Arctic, we learned how to fight, how to knock our enemy out of the sky and from the sea." He came home on another ship, which was attacked by Axis submarines near Iceland. During the war, Carse's writing output switched from action-packed fiction to letting readers at home know how the war felt from the front lines. He often discussed his experiences as a merchant marine, even writing about his convoy to Murmansk for the Saturday Evening Post. After World War II, his short story output shrank. He only wrote 32 short stories after the war. Instead, he focused on writing books, both adult and juvenile, fiction and nonfiction. He wrote of ships and the sea, whaling, island castaways, and the Civil War. He also took the pen name John Vail and wrote novels of adventure, war stories, and historical fiction, most of which were published by Fawcett Gold Medal. Although his nonfiction received the critics' praise, his novels sometimes got tepid reviews. People claimed he spent too much time in his characters' heads. Regardless of those reviews, Carse kept writing and composed more than 50 books. In 1949, one of his short stories was adapted into an episode of the television series Suspense. And his other brush with Hollywood came in 1961, when he was asked to write the novelization for the Steve Reeves swashbuckler Morgan the Pirate. Now, you would think his stalwart service would save him from the eyes of the House Committee on Un-American Activities, but his name was included in their reports. Carse was critical of the prison system and advocated civil rights. In 1947, he co-sponsored a parade for May Day, which was, of course, a popular communist holiday. In 1948, he co-signed a letter to President Truman asking for the release of imprisoned members of the Joint Anti-Fascist Refugee Committee. That committee publicly opposed Franco Spain. And the left-wing politics in his novels, like Drums of the Empire, which sympathizes with proponents of the Haitian Revolution, must have also rubbed some people the wrong way. He was fired from the New York post of embarkation because the army suspected that he was a communist. Novelist Howard Fast telegrammed President Truman to protest the sacking. Even long after leaving the Merchant Marines, the sea called him. He sailed yachts from Maine to Maryland and maintained a chief mate's license for ships of any tonnage in any ocean. In 1970, he was awarded the honorary rank of captain at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point. He would claim that half of his life was spent on the water. Carse passed away in 1971 at the age of 67. At the time of his death, he had been working on 3 new books: A History of the English Channel, A History of the Northwest Passage, and A History of Eastern Long Island, where he made his home. So what did I think of the Sea Waifs? I thought that it was pretty vividly written. The descriptions of what it was like to be on a ship, what it was like to be under attack, were very realistic. I felt that it was, true to what these people would have experienced. I have a love-hate relationship with the constant doing flashbacks of the different characters' histories. You know, you kind of find why Lucille is so broken and wants to sleep around to fill the emptiness in her soul. You find out why the captain is the way he is, why Martha is the way he is, why Analdi is the way he is, and Freishig, and all these other characters, some who, you know, just get a passing mention in one chapter. You find out about them. I don't know if Carse was doing that just to fill the pages so that this could be one of those Red Seal fatties, or if, you know, this was just something he wanted to do to round out these characters. And I'm not saying that those backgrounds were bad. I just, sometimes it pulled me away from the action of what was going on, and I wanted to stay in the moment and not, you know, find out, well, why are they that way? You know, the book has a really brutal view of humanity. I mean, the things that these sailors do to each other, what they do to poor Lucille, is sometimes quite fiendish, completely inhumane. And I don't know if Vail is, or Carse, is describing really how savage life can get on these boats when they're out at sea for so long that, you know, the people just kind of degenerate and lose a concept of the social contract that they would have had on dry land, or if he's just upping it for dramatic effect. I don't know, but there are a lot of nasty people doing nasty and stupid things in here. And, you know, they need that captain to put them on the straight and narrow. At the same time, even though these people are so rotten, you can see that they have souls, that they have hearts, that they have passions, that there are good things about them. Maybe not Analdi, but that, you know, they're just being corrupted by either, you know, sexual desire or alcoholism or a broken heart that they had a long time ago, or, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of them are still trying to work through the things that they experienced on other ships and earlier in the war. You get the impression that the sea waifs aren't just those two ladies on the raft, but they all are waifs just kind of floating out there in this ship trying to survive. I'm really struck by the challenges that these characters face, and it really makes me think about World War II and the experiences that people who lived through that period would have had that I think today are almost unimaginable for us. You know, obviously I have had challenges and heartbreak and things in my life, you know, medical and emotional and yada, yada, yada. But I think that if you compared those to the kinds of challenges that the people out in the Pacific or fighting in Europe had during World War II, that, you know, it's almost comical. One of my grandfathers and my great uncle both served in World War II, and they were both very quiet about it. They did not tell war stories. They did not talk about, you know, being heroes and things like that. And what they did share was often, you know, just a peek into some of the darkness and the hardships that they encountered. Uncle Elmer was in the Pacific, like these guys in the Sea Waifs. He was not a sailor on a ship, but an army man going from island to island and base to base. And he was one of the cooks for it. And when he came back, he burned his cookbook, which, you know, was in a way kind of funny because it was like how to make chili for, you know, 200 men. And you know, using these enormous amounts of ingredients. But he wanted to have nothing to do with that, and completely destroyed that book. He did tell stories of like how actually he just had two stories. One was of how his wife, Aunt Hazel, once sent him as a gift a jar of maraschino cherries, and she took out all of the sugar syrup and replaced it with booze. And so it was a nice, big, happy surprise for him when he got those cherries. And another one is less fun, and that is where he remembered that every night he went out with the lieutenant to see where the Japanese soldiers were hiding, and he was there to guard the lieutenant and keep an eye out. And one night he was so sick with malaria that he couldn't go, and someone else went, and both of them were killed. And Uncle Elmer then carried that guilt that, you know, he should have been the one that was out there doing that. And because he was sick with malaria, he couldn't do it. As rough as my life may be, I can't imagine carrying that kind of emotional weight around. And you get the impression that just about everyone who was involved with World War II had those kinds of stories and carried that weight. And it's no wonder that during the 1950s they wanted to have the most normal life imaginable and just watch sitcoms on TV and, you know, have 2.5 kids in a suburb and, you know, drive a Pontiac Bonneville and just have some peace and normalcy. So in a way, the Sea Waifs maybe makes me reflect on that, and I appreciate that almost even more than the story itself. It's fun. If you like World War II stuff, this is a good one. The ending is it's a little tragic for some, but you know, I wonder what it would have been like if it was half as long. Well, anyway, have you read any Robert Carse? Any John Vail? I have one more book of his. I have Hold Back the Sun, which is about an Israeli woman, I believe. Paperback Warrior read and reviewed that. He gave it a tepid review, said it was decent but not amazing. But I am curious, and I'd like to read more of Carse's work. I know he wrote a book about whaling, and I almost said I dig whaling. I don't. I think whales are amazing, beautiful creatures, and we should not slaughter them for oil. But there is something excitedly romantic about, you know, man versus the sea and man versus monster and that sort of thing. I'm one of the few people that actually really loves Moby Dick. I think that's a fantastic book. So I'd like to read Carse's book on whaling and see if it got some of that magic. So anyway, curious about what you think. Maybe you've read Sea Waifs, or maybe you've got some crazy World War II story that Grandpa passed down to you. Leave your comments below. I'd be excited to read them, and I'll see you next time.